Justin? No, it's our word. It's our form.
Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, November 25th, 2013. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Brado? Here. Mr. Capral is absent. Mr. Swikowski?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Verkust?
Here. Next is our consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of November 12th, 2013, approval of the bills in the amount of $1,030,251.85, approval of the October 2013 revenue and expenditure report, and approval of the Michigan DEQ Community Public Water Supply annual fee in the amount of $5,358.66. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello to approve the consent agenda with the bills in the amount of $1,030,251.85. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. There was a proposal to move item I to item C2. Just in the interest of respecting Mr. Newmer's time, are there any other revisions or proposals?
Sir Supervisor, I'll make a motion to approve the regular agenda with the aforementioned changes.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Swikowski to approve the agenda as revised. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next is announcements, board members. I think it's next Tuesday is the Christmas tree lighting,
December 3rd.
December 3rd. I thought Mr. Capral may want to mention something about it, but we'll be lighting the Christmas tree. We have cookies and hot cocoa. I believe the high school band and choir is going to be here. And hopefully the jolly old elf will also be here for photographs. I believe that starts at 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock next Tuesday, December 3rd, Christmas tree lighting. For all the events going on in our township, you can visit the township website, www.harrison-township.org, and there's links to all of the other programs and activities. We also have Thanksgiving coming up, so hopefully everyone enjoys a happy Thanksgiving in a few days here. Are there any announcements from the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, and that's item B, a resolution honoring Eagle Scout Nicholas Lucas. Board members, before you is a resolution we'll consider adopting today, and I'll read that. Whereas patriotism and volunteerism are a very important aspect of what Scouts teach, and Nicholas Lucas has truly shown a pride in his country and a commitment to his community, and whereas the rank of Eagle Scout is a tremendous honor to have bestowed upon a Scout and reserved for those Scouts who demonstrate Scout spirit, service, and leadership and complete an extensive service project, and whereas Nicholas Lucas's Eagle Scout Service Project, the design, funding, construction, and installation of the outdoor sign for the Harrison Township Public Library enhances the aesthetics and usability of a township asset, and whereas there were many hours spent planning and executing the library project, ensuring that it was successful, including overcoming the difficulties of coordinating between library director and the township engineer to design, fundraising to purchase materials, and leading young people and adults in the installation, And whereas attaining the rank of Eagle Scout is not just the result of this one act of charity, but the culmination of years of hard work, dedication, and volunteerism that Nicholas Lucas has put forward in the Boy Scouts of America, now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the residents of Harrison Township, the Board of Trustees wishes to thank Nicholas Lucas for his service to the community and to wish him a long life and happiness. Board members, we have with us Mr. Lucas. As you know, he's the young man for his Eagle Scout project that constructed the sign for the library. Did an excellent job of matching the appearance of that to the other signs within the township, and certainly all the residents benefit from his act of charity. So I want to take this time to thank him personally.
Great job.
Is there a,
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the resolution as presented.
all right, we've got a motion
Support.
by Mr. Switkowski with support by Mr. Whip to adopt the resolution honoring Mr. Nicholas Lucas. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Whit, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Switkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Caprow is absent. Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes,
Resolution's adopted.
excellent. And again, thank you very much.
And present it to him? Oh, it's not all signed, or- Okay.
We have the resolution, but unfortunately, we'll get it signed completely for you and then get it to you, okay? Thank you.
One empty chair.
Would you like to say anything?
You can see them. Everybody can see them.
Well, come on up.
Be proud.
Wow, a lot of patches.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, congrats.
Thank you. Don't trip there.
You get caught by the Christmas decorations.
You should get a special patch for work with an engineer. That's hard right there.
All right, next on our agenda is item C1 from the accounting office. Mr. Spencer?
I just realized my own item's not in my board pack, so I'm going to speak extemporaneously tonight. The Internal Revenue Service, most people think of as a really rigid organization, very specific about their demands, and for the most part they are, but there are some areas that they deal with, particularly retirement plans, where the regulations cover everything from a one-person company up to Microsoft and General Motors. So they build a lot of flexibility into the code to cover that wide variety. And what that requires on the part of the individual or the corporation is they have to actually write a plan saying which of the many regulations that apply to that specific plan they're going to use. And then the plan's administered from that document, and if the IRS ever wants to come in and audit, they will audit from that document, not their regulations. And that's a long roundabout way of saying that the township, amongst its various pension plans, has a cafeteria plan, fringe benefit plan. And it was written quite some time ago by Plant Moran and hadn't been updated much, didn't really need to be, but there are some recent regulations in particular that the IRS put into play that need to be written into the township's plan if we're going to take advantage of them. And one of the more exciting things, if I can use that word, was the fact that the IRS finally heard everybody being concerned and complaining about the fact that at the beginning of the year, you have to dedicate some amount of money being withdrawn from your payroll in anticipation of covering medical bills, but on January 1st, you have no idea what your medical bills are going to be for the whole year. And that part of the program was what they call use it or lose it. So if you set aside $2,000 and only had $500 worth of bills, you were just stuck. You lost that money. So the IRS recently made this a little more flexible and put in a regulation into the code that says that if a person has some money left over at the end of the year, they're now going to be allowed to carry that money over into the next year. Not a lot of money, but up to $500. So it seemed like a really beneficial thing to the employees here and everywhere else. So I wanted to get that written into our cafeteria plan so our employees can take advantage of that. And so I didn't update the code. I didn't update our plan for some of the other things in the code because it just didn't seem like our employees would ever take advantage of a lot of those things, but this one was just too important to pass up. So I revised the plan that you got a copy of to include the $500 carryover provision, and I'm hoping the board will think it's as beneficial as I do and approve the revised plan for that.
Okay. And of course, if there's a reason or an opportunity to make a change in the future, we always have the option of readdressing it. But right now, the primary one is to give our employees that opportunity to roll over funds so that they don't lose them at the end of the year, which I think is something that should have been allowed by the IRS, frankly, a long time ago. So, are there any questions regarding this amendment, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the township's cafeteria plan as amended.
Support.
Got a motion from Mr. York with support from Mr. Brado to approve the cafeteria plan amendment. I don't believe that takes a roll call vote, no? Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item I, or was item I, I'm sorry. And that is regarding the Coastal Zone Management Waterfront Redevelopment Plan. Board members, at the November 12th regular board meeting, the Board of Trustees selected Wade Trim to develop the Coastal Zone Management Waterfront Redevelopment Plan. 50% of the funding is coming from a CZM grant. We included the contract that we need to execute with the state of Michigan in the board packet. Several pages I don't think would be appropriate or worthwhile to read to you at this point. But basically we have to execute a contract with the DEQ. We gave that contract both to our engineer and our attorney to review. There were some friendly amendments proposed. We sent those back to the DEQ. They had no problem with them. So we have before you the contract that needs to be executed. I don't know if there's any questions or if there's a motion.
I make a motion to authorize the supervisor to execute the contract with the state of Michigan DEQ for the Coastal Zone Management Grant in the amount of $17,000 as presented.
All right. Is there support?
Support.
All right. We've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Switkowski to execute the contract. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda, items D come from the Water and Sewer Department. First, item D1 was submitted by the clerk's office. Mr. Witt?
Yes, this is the bid that came back for the Jeffers Court storm pump station improvements that we're doing through Community Development Block Grant. We ended up having the bid opening on Friday at 10 o'clock. Wade Trim took the bids, reviewed them, and came back with the low bidder of Cordis Brothers Trucking and Excavating at a cost of $36,910. If you remember, we have just around $46,000 allocated through CDBG for this project. So this came in under that price, and hopefully that gives us a little room in case we come across something while we're out on the project. I don't know if you have anything to add, Dave, or?
Yeah, board members, I know that, talking to Mr. Axtell, he's worked with Cordis Brothers several times, is kind of comfortable with them as a contractor. And we're looking forward to getting that project started and getting the work done before the end of the year.
Mr. Newmer, I know there were some variables in here, and I see that you included some unit prices, so there may be some additional work that we can have done within the scope of this project that may consume the balance of that money, or of that grant, or those funds.
Yes, that's true. When we get on the site, if there's an opportunity to get a little bit of additional work done, if it's within the budget, we would do so.
And there's some permitting that's included, so overall, good thing that we're under that limit, because there are some additional costs. Okay. All right, discussion, board members? If not, is there a motion?
My only, how do you think we should word it so that we can work within our CDBG? But, I mean, the contract bid price was 36,910, but if we run into something because of some of the unknowns of this project, because of some of the permitting things that are gonna be on top of this, Dave, you got an idea as to how to?
Yeah, oftentimes when we do a project like through the sewer and water department, we might authorize a contingency amount to be authorized at the direction of the water and sewer superintendent, or, you know, whoever the staff members in charge of the project. In this case, since this project's being run through the clerk's office, perhaps Mr. Witt could be authorized to authorize change orders or additions, whatever needs to be done to the project, up to the amount of the block grant money that you have available.
So maybe a proposed motion might be to award the Jeffers Court Storm Pump Station site improvements to Cordis Brothers for $36,910, and authorize Mr. Witt to work with the engineer to authorize any additional work within the budgeted amount.
Yeah, a
Is
contingency,
that up to
yeah.
$10,000?
Close to
$10,000 of the project. What's the fund? Seems maybe a
There-
little much.
There's 46,000 and change that. we know what-
46.7 is what there's,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we know a portion of it is not really a contingency. We were told by the county that we do need a soil erosion permit, and I don't know exactly what the dollar figure is up for that, Dave, but,
$500, I think?
Well, there's a permit, but there's also
and there's
some
a
additional.
bonding, and then,
Right.
so, I mean, it's not just a simple cost, so that's gonna come right off that, that's sort of outside of that contingency, it's something that we already know is gonna be
Right.
an addition to this 36,910.
There could be some additional silt fencing that the contractor has to do.
Right.
But wasn't there some fence that was in question, and you'd said, well, we'll have a unit price so that if we have dollars available for that, we'll be able to correct or erect some additional fencing?
The chain link fencing on the site, there's the two gates at the end of Jeffers Court, and then the chain link fencing that kind of goes off to the east and west of that. And we didn't know how much of that we'd be able to replace depending on what the budget was. So there's some, potentially some additional room within the block grant money that you've got available. We may be able to increase the amount of fence that we can replace and get more of it
Right.
updated.
And I guess the point being that when you initially established the scope of work, as opposed to including everything that you wanted to do, it was my understanding from Mr. Extel that you took some of that out and said, well, let's make sure that we can at least get this under the budget, and then if we need to, we've got a unit price per linear foot of fencing. So we've kind of went into this knowing that there's some additional fence that we'd like to replace, and I think that's why, I don't want to call it a contingency. This isn't a, if the contractor has a mistake, this is additional work up to the CDBG grant amount. If we don't use it, we're going to lose that grant. But, and this isn't something subject to the whim of the contractor through Mr. Newmer's foresight. He literally asked them to give me a cost per foot for fencing, so they can't arbitrarily come up with a number that's crazy. And after comparing the prices, they had a price that was in line for their fencing, so they don't have an abnormal price compared to the other contractors that submitted a quote. So I want to make sure this isn't a contingency in the normal sense where we just have a percentage, in case there's some unforeseen.
Just gonna try and get some additional work done that wasn't in that original bid, because we were trying to bring it in within our grant, so we could make sure we got that base work done.
So a proposed motion would be to place the Jeffers Court Storm Pump Station Site Improvement Project with Cordis Brothers at their estimate of $36,910, utilizing CDBG grant dollars, and to authorize Mr. Witt to work with Mr. Newmer and authorize additional work as required up to the total amount of the CDBG dollars that are in jeopardy by the end of the year. That'd be a proposed motion.
I'll go ahead and make that motion, Mr. Supervisor.
All right. Is there support?
Support.
All right. We had some discussion. I don't know if there is any discussion, board, or if not, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Servil, resident. I have no objection to what Mr. Witt suggests, but I'm wondering if you really have to lose that money. It seems to me like Cordis Brothers, if you have additional work that you want done, it's not contingency work, should be able to come up with whatever you're gonna do, and probably still have $5,000 left over, if you're talking about fencing, if that's what I heard. But as long as you roll that over into some other account that's eligible by the end of the year, you can do that, can't you?
No,
You can only move it one time and that's it?
we have to spend it by December 31st of 2013, otherwise the county will recapture it.
Okay. My mistake. Thank you.
Good point, though. We'll close the floor for public comment. Good point. We obviously don't want to just rush out and spend it, but this was a scenario where the dollars weren't able to be spent on other projects, and that's the reason why we've been able to get this project done. And again, we have to thank Mr. Newmer for his resourcefulness, because there was a point where we were concerned that we wouldn't be able to reallocate these dollars, and in fact, we would lose the funding, so. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Switkowski to source the Jeffers Court Storm Pump Station Site Improvement Project with Cordis Brothers for $36,910, and to direct Mr. Witt to work with Mr. Newmer and authorize any additional work on site that's needed up to the CDBG grant amount limit. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board.
I'll update the board as those go through, once we sort of have an idea as to where that's gonna be, just so you have an idea.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is item D2. Board members, the Water and Sewer Department has experienced several water main breaks on a 6-inch water main that extends from Chancel Street through a wooded easement to Crocker Boulevard. This water main passes directly between two homes on Chancel Street. In the event that this water main might break between the two homes, the damage to the homeowners and the cost of the township could be extensive. Our water and sewer superintendent asked 3 contractors for a quote to eliminate this water main and reroute the water services for the 5 homes currently serviced by this main. There was also a request to the same contractors for a quote to add 75 lineal feet of 6-inch ductile iron water main at the ends of Mast Court and Church Street to tie the 2 streets together, eliminating 2 dead-end water mains which require monthly flushing to maintain water quality. So we've got in the board packet the quotes from multiple contractors. We've got our water and sewer, actually Dave Newmer wasn't able to be with us. Justin is here with us, and you've got any questions? What's that? I'm sorry, Dave Axtell. Dave Axtell is,
Too many Daves.
yeah, so. Right, but Justin Murphy is here from our water and sewer department. He worked with the contractors if you have any questions. But this is one project that's probably avoiding a hazardous condition, and another that improves water quality and will eliminate future monthly service, just basically to loop a water main. So I don't know if there's any questions or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to authorize low bidder Telto Contracting Incorporated to perform the water main elimination and service line reconnects on Chancel Street and Crocker Boulevard, and to install 75 lineal feet of 6-inch ductile iron water main at the ends of Mass Court and Church Church Street, which will eliminate 2 dead-end water mains.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Swakowski. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next, item D3 regarding the SAW grant. Board members, at our October 28 regular board meeting, we chose Wade Trim to prepare a stormwater asset management grant application. Before you is the proposed resolution that needs to be presented with that application. Specific to a lot of the details of this SAW grant, I would defer to Mr. Newmer. But suffice it to say that there were 3 projects that we looked at, and the total of that grant, as we understand it, would be $1.6 million that we're requesting. The first $1 million require a 10% match. Anything after that requires a 25% match. If we were to be successful in acquiring this $1.6 million grant, it would come with a $250,000 match. Mr. Newmer, perhaps you can speak a little bit to the 3 projects and the value of each.
Sure. Under the SAW Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater Grant Program, you can apply for design engineering for sanitary projects, design engineering for stormwater projects, or asset management projects, to put together an asset management plan. The township is looking at pursuing all 3 of those. For stormwater design project, we're looking at the design of the Beechwood Pump Station. That's been a top priority, or on the top of the township's to-do list for a while now. Now we've got the opportunity to get a good majority of the engineering paid for. The second item would be, for a sanitary project, would be the replacement of the Bay Haven Pump Station and the force main servicing that. The township's had several instances where the force main has broken, and they've had to replace it. They're concerned about the integrity of that force main and the integrity of the pump station. That pump station services the Venice Shores subdivision and all the area on North River Road to the east of Venice Shores. So it's a pretty large area of the township that it services. The third part of the project would be assembling an asset management program. And this is something that the state is pushing, especially through these SAW grants. Asset management program for your sanitary sewer system is going to encompass doing a complete inventory of the system, going out and actually locating all the manholes, getting good information on the pipe sizes, inverts, doing a condition assessment on the manholes and the pipes with cleaning and televising. We'll be going through and doing a criticality analysis to determine how critical each of the pieces of infrastructure are. If a certain pipe were to fail, what the consequences would be. We'll be looking at a financial analysis and capital improvements plan for the defects that are identified through the condition assessment. We'll be looking at programming those into a capital improvements plan, and then doing a rate study to determine how the township's sanitary sewer rate is generating revenue compared to the operation and maintenance costs that you have, and the requirements of the capital improvement plan in order to fix those things that need to be fixed. With this plan, we'll also be expanding a little bit on the integrity of the sanitary sewer system itself. We'll be performing some metering in the system to determine areas that may be subject to wet weather influence, inflow and infiltration. Essentially, that's unmetered water that the township pays for treatment on. It's a loss to your system, so it's something that you want to be aware of. And we'll also be looking at other issues such as capacities of sewers, capacities of pump stations, as they're impacted by build-out within the community. As far as the cost breakdown goes, we're looking at about $160,000 for the design of the Beechwood Pump Station and the Bay Haven Pump Station together. Those 2 items are listed in one category on the SAW grant application. The asset management plan itself is about $400,000 for the condition assessment, the GIS updates, and everything that goes with that. And then in addition to that, the balance of the grant would be for televising, cleaning, and inspecting sanitary sewers throughout the township.
So, so roughly 160,000, or so let's say 10% of this total project is true engineering costs. The stormwater pump at Beechwood requires a hydraulic analysis, kind of look at what flows are, things like that. The balance of that money, in essence, what we'd be building is a model of our sewer system. There's increasing discussions that just like our water rates used to just be based on sheer consumption, at one point, the Detroit Water and Sewer Department decided to say, well, we want to charge you not only based on the amount that we give you, but how far we have to push it, if you use too much during peak times, and things like that, so that led to the incorporation of our storage tank to keep our rates low. Similarly, Public Works has begun a process of analyzing what our sanitary sewer flows are during high water rain events, which is one of the contributing factors to overflows. Although we don't personally have that, they're looking at basically metering how much water you're putting into the system. And as Mr. Newmer pointed out, that infiltration, or basically the rainwater that enters into our sanitary system, is something that we all pay for in higher sewage costs. This would help us to literally first go through and clean all of our sewers. Then literally all 89 miles of sanitary sewers that we have would be cleaned as a part of this. Then they would be cameraed. They would be literally, inspected visually. And then also, by measuring flows during some of these rain events over a period of time, we'd be able to isolate some of the areas in the township that may have greater issues with infiltration. This should help us in saying, okay, what areas, what parts of our asset, in terms of managing, what parts should be fixed first? What areas should we focus on to give us the best return on that investment? It's also important to note that of this money, the majority of it is in the asset management in this grant, and also the camera inspecting the sewer lines. We've looked at, I don't remember exactly the breakdown, I'm just gonna say maybe it was about 30% of the work, plus or minus. We can perform that work ourselves at the township. So let's just say that the asset management portion of this is $1.3 million, and the videoing of the sewers are $600,000. We may find that we can perform $200,000 of that work ourselves, and the payee on that would actually be the Harrison Township Water and Sewer System. So we can actually perform the work, and the state would actually pay us for the performance of that labor. So, in essence, let's say if you said, well, we have 8 men in the field, and for the course of 6 months they perform some of this work, we would be removing 2 men from the budget for a 6-month period of time. So if we were successful in getting this grant, a portion of that is really paying ourselves or removing a cost, depending on the time of the year and the availability of our manpower based on water main breaks and other issues in the township. So there are some ancillary benefits. One of the questions I'd ask Mr. Newmer is, if we have 3 different projects, should we split them into 3? Does that increase our chances of getting the grant? Mr. Newmer explained that they're putting out, was it $100 million?
97.
$97 million. If there's more interest in those dollars, then in other words, if the total applications add up to be 200 million, then they're going to use a lottery system to decide who gets it. So the idea being, submit one application and you have a greater chance of being successful. At least that's the strategy that other municipalities are taking on this round of grants. And if not, then they push it to the next round of grant funding.
Yep, the total program is $450 million over a 5-year period. The 97 million is for this first fiscal year, and then they'll be funding more chunks of that 450 million into the next 4 years. So, and it is, the grants are done on a first come, first served basis, so we're gonna be submitting on the first day that grants are available to be submitted. Should the township not be successful in the lottery, then you'll be first up for the money when the next appropriation comes around.
And does this resolution this doesn't commit us to the money should we change down the road, or?
That's true. We're just applying for the grant right now. So if you're successful in getting the grant, the state will come back to you with a grant agreement, a contract.
So there'd be another
And then
opportunity to look at this in case, I mean,
Right.
I think it's worthwhile, but I just wanted to make sure I know what.
Right. When you actually adopt the agreement, the contract, that's when you're committed to the grant.
Right. Any discussion? If not, do we have a motion to adopt the resolution as presented?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution in support of the application for the Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater Grant as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to adopt the resolution for the Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater Grant Application Resolution. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you take a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tomello?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral is absent. Mr. Swikowski?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes.
Resolution's adopted.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next on our agenda is item E1. Board members, since this agenda item was submitted, we in fact did hear from Mr. Parak regarding his retirement. So I'll read the agenda request as it was presented and then explain possible modification. Board members, you're aware that our building official had submitted for his retirement. His intended last day was November 30th, 2013. Since then, he'd indicated that he would like to move that approximately a month to December 31st. We've had some response to our job posting, but initially it was minimal. We made some revisions and posted some additional areas. We've received a few more applicants. There's time needed to ensure that the right individual is chosen for this position, and the hiring process will certainly not be completed before November 30. And depending on the applicant, it certainly could take longer. So I talked to Mr. Newmer about the possibility of them providing a temporary building official. Asked him to make a proposal. He's given us that proposal. The thought here is that at some point, Mr. Parak will have retired, and if we're not in a position to have a building official able to be hired at that point, there's a gap. There was some discussion as to whether or not that gap is legally required or not. My investigation indicated that we are required to have a building official. Mr. York, you'd indicated that you believe that to be different. In either case, right now, we currently have one building inspector who's on leave, and my concern would be that if such an opportunity or such a situation comes up where we do not have a building official, I would like to know that this board would be comfortable with us having a relationship with Wade Trim to bring someone in on a temporary basis to fill. Another possibility, for example, could be that some of the applicants that we've seen so far are not in fact building officials, but they are building inspectors. The prerequisite to be a building official is to have at least 2 years working as a licensed building inspector. So the possibility exists that somebody could be in another community already working. Perhaps they have a retirement date. We may find that we have, for example, a good candidate, and the candidate says, you know, I can't start for 45 days, but effective, January 31st, I'm eligible to retire, and I could start shortly thereafter. Or I've got to give a certain notice to my employer, et cetera, et cetera. So without knowing that, as opposed to waiting to the last minute when we're without that building official, at this point, I'm asking the board to see what their thoughts are regarding establishing a relationship with Wade Trim. And at such time as Mr. Parak may retire and we're not able to fill that position for a short period of time, a contract with Wade Trim for the building official position.
Mr. Chairman, I think we all received the email today that Mr. Parak's extending his employment by a month.
Right.
I guess, has anybody questioned or asked Mr. Parak whether or not he would be willing to stay until we fill the position.
We have not, I have not had that conversation with him. The last conversation I had was due to some legal matters. He'd asked if he could stay an additional month, and I said, yeah, that would be fine. I'd offered, said that there's no problem with that. But at this point, we haven't, he has not indicated a willingness to stay beyond those 30 days.
Well, we have another meeting, for the end of, in December. We know he's gonna be there through the month, so I think if there's any conversation, that the full-time officials could meet with him and ask him if he'd be willing to stay until that position is filled. Be a lot cheaper than $85 an hour.
Well,
I mean, I have nothing against Wade Trim, but,
Sure.
I mean, if we have a building official in place, and if he's willing to stay, if he's not willing to stay, to me, then we can discuss this at the December meeting. That's, my opinion.
yeah, in fact, the $85 an hour for about a 3-day period it actually is a savings over what we currently pay for our
Yeah.
building official.
Well,
But the
our
level of
building, that's
services-
that's more than double his hourly rate now, if you were to break it down. So even with his benefits, it's not that much of a savings. I mean,
Yeah, this isn't-
everything depends on how many hours you're gonna use this guy. You use it, in a 10 hours, all of a sudden, we've, spent $850. I guess, we're not under an immediate time constraint when we know we've got till the end of December. And we've got one more meeting that if Mr. Parox says, no way, do I want to stay beyond the 31st of December, then we can act at the next meeting to make sure that by law, we're covered with a certified building official.
Sure, yeah, certainly when I prepared this, I didn't know that
Yeah,
this
I don't
morning
think
he would
well, like I
submit a
said, it
30-day.
came today, so.
Yeah, 30-day extension, first of all. And I'm comfortable in waiting. My point is I'll be asking the same thing roughly 2 weeks from now that I'll be asking now in the absence of Mr. Parak making arrangements to stay an additional amount of time. But I have no problem tabling this for 2 weeks. There's no problem with that.
That would be my motion.
Well, we got a motion on the floor, dear.
Is there support for that motion?
I'll support it. David's got it.
All right, so we got a motion by Mr. Swakowski with support by Mr. Brado to table item E1.
I do have a question.
To,
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say to table, I wanna make sure I state the motion right, E1, to the 12, is it 12/9?
Yes.
yes.
12/9/13 regular board meeting, I'm sorry.
Dave, if we did need to engage in your company's services, how much notice would you need?
If we get a couple, day or two,
Oh, okay, so it's
Notice,
not,
that's fine.
okay.
Okay, Mr. Yoder?
Yes, board members, I did speak with Mr. Prock on Friday, and when I saw this, I was, we spent the other night arguing over $6,000, and I saw this at $3,200 a month. No offense to Wade Trim or anything, I understand, dollars are dollars. Mr. Prock, he's an honorable guy, and he did indicate that he would be more than happy to stay until we did find a building official. And one of the things that he was quite concerned about was the transition. This is a big job in the community, and it'd be nice, once we hire somebody, if in fact our current building official spends some time with the new building official, bring him up to speed on what's going on in the community, much like, we hired Wade Trim. What did that take you? Probably about a good year or two to really get a grasp of what, I'm not saying that's our time frame, but, it's nice to have some consistency in moving forward. And, unfortunately, right now, we do have part-time building inspectors, so they really don't have that history. But he was more than amicable. All somebody has to do is ask him. And I'm sure that he indicated to me that he'd be happy to do that.
And it may be that he would be, initially, he had indicated that he was looking at employment elsewhere, and I think indicated that he thought this time was gonna come up actually more rapidly. But in light of the note that he gave, there may be some value, and he may be in fact willing to establish a financial relationship beyond his retirement date for a short period of time, or, you know, some time for a transition, and that may be also worthwhile, so.
You know, and, you know, let's be honest, you know, there's a new contract, so I think, you know, December 31st is, you know, that's part of why he has this hard date. If certain things don't change in the contract, I would bet that he would just continue being an employee until such time as need be, whether that's January 15th or the 30th, or, you know, I don't know, maybe even into February. I don't know what kind of candidates we're gonna get, or how long the process is gonna take at this point, so.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Swikowski, with support by Mr. Brado to table item E1 to our December 9th regular board meeting. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, next on the agenda, item F1. Did a little bit of research on this.
That's a big question.
Well, so I'll, first let me read the agenda request. Board members, there are 2 members of our zoning board of appeals that have reached the end of their terms of appointment. Mr. Mark Bacha with the planning commission, he's the liaison, and Mr. Dean Smith. Both members have been valuable members of the ZBA, and both have expressed a willingness to continue to serve. We have also received an application from Mrs. Dana Hernelstein to serve on the ZBA as a second alternate member. The question that came up in discussions was whether or not we can name or establish who the planning commission liaison is.
As I, you know, I talked to Mr. Talmanello from the planning commission, he says basically what they do is submit the name, but it still has to be board approval, so.
Right.
I was in error when I talked earlier, so.
Yeah, no problem.
Traditionally been the way.
Yep, yep. Well, I spoke with the chairs of both the zoning board of appeals as well as planning commission. They both indicated, of course, earlier we reappointed some members to the planning commission. They were both happy with the members that they have. And it's a little tricky because if we don't name someone that sits on both boards, then there can't really be a liaison. So
Right.
there is a harmonious relationship between our board and each of those boards to name this person. So in light of that, I would recommend the reappointment of Mr. Mark Bacha as the Planning Commission liaison to the ZBA for a 3-year term to expire December 20, 2016. The reappointment of Mr. Dean Smith to the ZBA for a 3-year term to expire December 20, 2016, and the appointment of Mrs. Dana Hernelstein to the ZBA as second alternate member for a 3-year term to expire November 25, 2016.
So moved.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Swikowski. Discussion, board members?
Just, I was speaking with Ms. Hernelstein before the meeting. She came and has sat through this entire thing. The reason,
her
she,
there?
yeah, she's, the reason she came, I asked her, I said, you know, you're a recent graduate. What got you interested in, you know, serving for the township? She goes, well, actually, the beautification commission gave me one of their great gardening signs at our house, and so I wanted to get involved in the community, and so I can make a benefit too. So I thought that was a really cool story about how the other committees have an impact on everything else.
Yeah, and involvement, community involvement, very good. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Serville, ZBA member. I'm glad, first off, thank you for appointing a second alternate. We've had many meetings where, as a courtesy, we've told people if we don't have a full board that they can postpone. We had that happen last month. We wouldn't have had to have a meeting if we'd have had 5 people the meeting before it. Cost the township $250. That said, welcome aboard. But with Member Bacha, is his PC tenure the same as you just appointed?
He was appointed last meeting, 2 meetings ago. I believe it's the same.
I believe
same
what you
same
really
term.
need to do is make it concurrent with his PC appointment.
Yeah, I think they are.
It is.
I think they
It was a
Okay.
3-year.
Yes, it was.
All right. That's all I have. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Can the PC change that, or is that a 3-year term? I don't know, I'm just asking since the
Well, they
question
could, you know,
The-
if somebody,
the
if
board
Mr.
appoints.
Batcher had to
Yeah,
leave
and
or
it's
something.
It's
Yeah.
in our bylaws, so. we
Yeah,
Yeah, we've
have
had
to-
members that have, I mean, there's a process for removing members. I mean, members can move out of the township or, you know, change their
And somebody could
eligibility or
just,
interest.
You know, I guess he could say that he doesn't wanna do it anymore, 2
Correct.
years or whatever.
Correct, and then we'd
Absolutely.
send a request to the board to say
Yeah.
we wanna
Yep.
appoint somebody else to that liaison position.
Right, and that's happened before, for
Yes.
various reasons, medical and otherwise, so. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Are there any further board comments? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Swetkowski to reappoint Mr. Mark Baccia as the Planning Commission Liaison to the ZBA for a 3-year term to expire December 2016. To reappoint Mr. Dean Smith to the ZBA for a 3-year term to expire December 2016. And to appoint Ms. Dana Hernelstein to the ZBA as a second alternate member for a 3-year term to expire November 2016. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda, this came from Planning Commission. Recommendation to introduce an ordinance amending the Charter Township of Harrison Code of Ordinances, Chapter 74, Section 74-76, Containment of Refuse, to prohibit the storage of refuse containers in any road side yard. Is there, I don't know if this is something, Mr. Tamanello, that you'd be willing to speak to?
Well, I can tell you that we did, Planning Commission worked to create this ordinance that talks about storage containers or refuse containers. We thought it was a little bit too restrictive on the first go-round. We submitted to the board, and they concurred with that assessment. So what we did is we went back and we tried to simplify this ordinance, and also what we did is we included a picture, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is some of the things to try to resolve and try to take care of some of the issues we're having with refuse containers that are either being left by the road or put in areas where it seemed inappropriate to try to reduce on blight conditions or conditions where people thought they may be unsightly.
Now, the difficult thing with drafting these ordinances, obviously with the first time, when we adopted our, the waste hauler ordinance and we had an issue relative to where these can be stored, was that, you know, we've had that for, I don't know, maybe 3 years now or 4 years, and, you know, there was a need to fine tune it. This is another stab at it, and I suppose if we travel throughout our community, we'll find an area or a homeowner or a neighborhood where you know, there's a small way that this could be tweaked. I see this as an improvement over our current ordinance. I thank the Planning Commission for their efforts in drafting this, and I think it's good. I certainly think it's an improvement over what our ordinance currently states regarding refuse containers.
My only concern with it is, I know in my last house, there was no way that I could get a can inside my garage. A single car garage, put a car in there, there's no more room.
Yep.
And in the winter, I would have had to have shoveled my garden out of the snow. I would have had to shovel my garden to be able to put the can anywhere other than in the front of the house. I mean, it's just, there's some homes where it's really impractical to put a can anywhere other than in the front.
Right.
And one side's fenced off, you're not going that way. The other side's fenced off, plus there's a garden or a walkway or, you know, something where it's really impractical to put something in there, where we're then forcing somebody to build a trash pad or something on the side of their house to be able to accommodate something that's really a change. That, I don't know if it makes, I don't know how you accommodate for that.
Sure.
But, I mean, I like the idea, but I don't know how it plays out in Harrison Township.
Sure. A couple of things there. One is, not every homeowner, although certainly a majority of them, use these, you know, larger refuse containers. Obviously, I'm sure all of us, none of us are so young here to never remember a time when we just had a can or we just put bags out as kids at the street. So, I mean, not everybody, you know, has a large refuse container. Some folks just literally put their trash out at the street the way they have done for years. Second thing is certain times of the year or in certain circumstances, you can understand where folks could have a difficulty in maybe, storing the refuse container. And then finally, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, like anything else, enforcement of these ordinances requires just some good old common sense. In the middle of July, when I drive around and I see a can with the lid open and half knocked over in front of a house, you say, that's really kind of unsightly, and there's gotta be a better way that you could store that refuse container. On the other hand, I've seen homes where folks, for whatever reason, there's a home on the corner of my street where the refuse container is stored neatly. It's in a side yard, but it's the front yard to the people that are across the street. But I've seen folks put up screening or different things to try to be respectful to their neighbors, so common sense, prevails. But right now, the way our ordinance is written, it's a lot more restrictive, and in some ways, really just doesn't make good sense. I think this is an improvement, but I think your point is valid, no matter how you write this. And I can't speak for planning commission, but I'm sure, there were more thoughts than what are just on this paper, but this is pared down to be the best way to handle it at this point.
And we realize that, this isn't going to satisfy, and everybody who has a residence in the township may or may not apply. I would think it would probably apply upwards of 95%, but I'm sure there's a small percentage. And we talked about that, and the more we talked about it, the more complex the ordinance became. So we sort of did, 180 degrees, and we said, let's just make this simple. Let's attach a picture. This should address, the majority of the homes in the township.
Yep.
From corners to, the big thing was, the backyard, right? So you can put it up against the house, but, we don't want it in the rear yard setback.
Yeah, or stored against somebody's fence. or
Exactly.
being a
So,
nuisance to others.
trying to get the refuse containers out from, the street, so when you drive by, so you don't see them, they're either in a side yard or a backyard. Some people put them in the garage in the winter, I don't, but some people do. So, and again, you're right, we could tackle this 10 ways from Sunday and come up with 10 different ordinances, but we tried to accommodate, a general ordinance.
Sure. All right. I don't know if there's any discussion or a motion.
I feel somewhat the same way Adam does. I know in the winter I get like a 5-foot, thing at the side of my house, the way the wind comes down North Point there, it always seems to, and, my concern is mostly in the winter, having to dig all that out.
Yeah.
And I understand that not all ordinances, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Harrison Township, there's small houses, there's big houses, there's people with lots of property, people with, smaller
lots.
amounts of property, there's people with, 5-foot, side yards, people with 10-foot, it's, and my biggest concern is, out of everything, are we really gonna go and be ticketing people $50 because they put their trash can in the front of their house? That's,
Right.
I don't, with all the other items, and, people have boats in their front yard, they have RVs in their front yard, they have, some people have washers and dryers in their front yards. We're not even enforcing that at this point.
Well,
A garbage can to me is, especially if it's in one of the big, one of those 96-gallon containers, it's sort of innocuous to me.
I have 3 teenagers that walk right past those green cans every week. So I like to take it down.
Yeah. Well, it's important to note, you brought up a good point in terms of writing tickets. Certainly, there has to be enforceability. It's hard for me to imagine that if there was a large snow event or a time of the year when ice or snow prevented someone from storing the refuse container, that they'd even bother giving them a notice. But certainly, the primary goal of ordinance enforcement is compliance and certainly not revenue. It's not a department that supports itself. The first step in any case is for the ordinance officer to either verbally acknowledge with the homeowner if they're home, or with a written notice to indicate to them a possible violation and encourage them to conform within a certain period of time. I think if you don't have a written list of ordinances, or if you don't have goals or requirements for people, then you've got no chance for enforcement. But our officer would be able to tell you that in a majority of cases, if you notify someone or you send them a letter, the majority of people are not cantankerous and they want to conform, and if sometimes they have a good reason for it, they say, well, I've got this or that project going on, but this will be taken care of in 2 weeks, and they do conform. So for every time that they contact, I guess you'd say for every 10 contacts that they make, we certainly don't get 10 tickets. Some of these are, some of our ordinance violations are bigger than others. But this is one where I think if we don't write down what we are asking folks to do, then we're gonna have a hard time maintaining a certain, look in our community.
Well, I guess I'm mostly worried that we do have one resident, that we put the information up on the cable and he's quite,
Persistent?
yes,
Okay.
quite persistent in the trash can blight in the front of the house, and I'm just worried that, we're gonna give ammunition and we're gonna find ourselves trying to maybe rectify, an ordinance, and next thing you know, we have people, this person standing here and calling us, 1, 2, 3, 4, John Street, they have their trash can, you better get your ordinance guy out there.
Well, our current ordinance is much more restrictive, if that
I
helps
have
you
not
out.
read
This,
the current ordinance because, in all honesty, trash, like I said, trash cans are, with all the other blight and all the other ordinance violations, this one just isn't on top of my list.
and I think, and I'd like to, I'm glad you said that, because frankly, I'm surprised at the level of conversation about this ordinance. Right now, we have an ordinance that addresses waste receptacles. It's much more restrictive than this is, and we've had no conversation.
Right.
After having a resident point out to us, hey, you're not enforcing this ordinance, one of the things we said is, gee whiz, this is a pretty silly ordinance. I mean, we don't even allow someone to put a trash can behind their home. That simply doesn't make sense. So when we asked Planning Commission to take a look at it, they said, yeah, we think we can improve it, and this is what they've done. I think not adopting this ordinance revision would be foolish, because what we have is much more restrictive and frankly unrealistic. I think it was just something that really wasn't examined really close when we adopted the waste hauler ordinance. So I believe this is an improvement, but the point I'm trying to make, and I think we all have to acknowledge, is we're not gonna be able to write down an ordinance that's gonna address every situation at every time for every snowfall or condition that there is. But this ordinance is a revision to one that we currently have that's much more restrictive. And I believe because of that, I think this is an improvement. But I see there's some public comment. Is there a motion this evening?
Larry, this section 74, is this the new language here?
The one that's attached,
Yeah.
No,
that's the.
that's the existing.
That's the existing one, that's the one that Mr. Rivers was talking about, how it was a lot more restrictive, so. you-
Well, it
you
just
could-
says storage of containers. Refuse container storage shall be located outside of the rear yard setback. That's all it says. As long as it's outside of the rear yard setback, which is that 30 feet, it really can be stored anywhere.
Correct.
That is correct.
And that's the concern.
That's the old one?
Okay. So under the old ordinance, you could store it in the front yard, and in the new ordinance, you can't. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a motion this evening?
I'll go ahead and make the motion as written. To amend chapter 74, article 5, section 74 through 76, containment of refuse of the Code of Ordinance, and publish a notice of introduction at the Charter Township of Harrison, and that the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during business hours, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
All right. We've had a fair amount of discussion, so if it's all right with the board, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Serville, resident. I kind of concur with Mr. York on this. I think of all the things that you could come up with, this is probably low-hanging fruit, and it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. but I've owned some lots over behind the Ball Diamond on South River Road for 6 years. And there's someone across the street that, at one point, there wasn't 10 square feet of their lot that wasn't covered. They own multiple lots there with some type of storage, either being boats, cars, firewood, whatever it might have been. Sandra Mutter told me that our light ordinance is too vague for her to enforce, that he can't have all that stuff. There's no limit to how many cars you can have. There's no limit to how many boats you can have, how many piles of wood you can have. And I'm having trouble selling a lot because of that, and yet you're worried about a damn trash can. In addition to that, 5 years ago, you entered into a contract with our planner to rewrite all the ordinances, and the idea was to bring blocks of them forward because it costs money to publish. You're bringing a single ordinance that's by your own volition, not probably going to be enforced all the time, and spending money to bring a single ordinance. I think it's pandering to one resident, and I don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Janet Adamski. I'm a Harrison Township resident. I live on Campo Lane. I agree with Mr. York. I don't want to be told where I can put my trash can. Furthermore, you can't get your ordinance officer to respond and react to blight, to litter. So what makes you think you're going to have any chance of doing something this minor? There are more serious issues in our township, and you're going to waste the person's time. I think you need more of them so they can go out and get the serious stuff than to waste time, especially even on the commission that has had to sit down and waste their time when they could have been doing something of more important issues. But I'd like to see more litter kept up in our township and get some of the bigger violations out of the way. Then if you have spare people and time, maybe tackle this at a later date, but not now. There's too many other important things out for our township to be working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Karcheski, residents. Haven't been here for a while, but I got a lot of phone calls when this came up. So I guess quite a few of the people wanted to know if we were going into a police state, since you're worried about the trash cans. Now, yes, I could see if you should say all trash should be in a container. Long as the container's not sitting at the end of the street all week, I could see something like that. You have a lot of plight in this township. When people make a complaint, it's in 30 days they're supposed to take care of that complaint? And when it's not, what happens? Nothing. And I, for one, am all over this township, and I've seen it myself. I've seen where people complain and nothing has been done. That is what you should be going after, not where somebody puts their trash can. Now, I have a neighbor that's on oxygen. She cannot take her oxygen and go and pull her trash can from the back. It's on the side, where it's very easy, where she's got a side door. She puts it down there, opens the door, throws it in the container. If she has to put that container around, which there is no driveway, because her driveway only ends by her door, by her side door, you make her, how's she going to get there, get it back, and go all the way to the street? Now, my husband is very nice and goes and gets her trash can as it is, but she can't throw her trash from the house into the container if you make her put it in her backyard. You should not have to worry about where somebody puts their trash can, long as if it's neat. You yourself said you put bags out there. Well, you shouldn't throw bags out there. You should put your big bags in a container, buy the big container, make sure the trash is in there, and that's good enough. But to tell somebody where to put it, long as it's not bothering anybody else, I don't see where the big deal is. I, for one, do not put mine in my backyard because, first of all, my backyard is very small. I also use my side door. My trash containers are right there. According to you, you're going to give me a ticket. I'm not moving my trash cans. Neither is the lady next door, because there's no way for her to do that. So you're going to give both of us tickets. I have another neighbor that's on the next block. She also has it very neatly right next to her garage door. She can't put it inside because the garage door is, her, like you, your garage isn't big enough to hold it if she puts her car there. Where's she gonna put it? Like your other house, like the people that own your house now, what are they supposed to do? There is more things to worry about in this township than to worry about a trash can. Long as the trash is put in a container, that is what you should have written up. And you do have that, I believe, in the other one. It has to be in a container. Make sure that's it. Don't worry about where. And if there's one person that cares about that's gonna call, well, let them start calling, because you're gonna give me that first ticket, and I guess we will fight that first ticket. And so will my neighbor and a lot of other people when you write that ticket for them, because there's no place for them to put it. And, Mr. Tom, now, I'd like to know where you're gonna put your trash now. In your backyard, where you have your patio, and it's gonna be there when all you have company in the summertime. That'll be a good one. Oh, so in other words, he can leave it by the street.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. The ordinance as proposed basically allows side yard storage as well as rear yard storage, so that should not be a problem for yourself or your neighbor. My concern with this is that it's a little, and I support this ordinance. I truly support this. Most people are good neighbors. Most people get the stuff behind the house or on the side of the house or whatever. But you know what? If you happen to be the person right across the street from somebody that's leaving it sit out in the front, you're affected. If you're trying to sell a house, you're affected. So I support this ordinance. I know the Planning Commission did a lot of work on this. But I think there's a couple changes that need to be made to this proposed ordinance. And since this is first reading, you can incorporate that into the next reading. First off, this basically implies that we're only talking about storage containers, this whole area here. You also allow recycling containers. The recycling containers should also be out of the front yard. You also allow in the ordinance bulk rubbish storage or bushes or whatever. Those should be also out of the front yard and put on the side. And also you allow plastic bags. So I think all you need to do is say storage of containers, and then maybe like for D, where it says A, B, C, D would be recyclable containers, telling them to put those behind the house or on the side. Garbage, and then maybe E would be garbage bags. Also, call them out so that somebody that sits there and only has cans, this would apply really clearly. But somebody that puts all garbage bags out, and there's a lot of people that do, they might get the idea they could still put them in the front. So again, to reiterate, I think this is a good attempt at trying to clean it up. Actually, the garbage containers and so on in the front yard do constitute blight. But it might be easier to be defined for people what exactly blight is, and this ordinance does that. And I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. I appreciate the clarification by the last resident. The ordinance does allow for basically the rear yard or the side yard, or in the case of a corner lot, what you might consider the secondary front yard. If you live on a corner lot, you really only have one side yard and a rear yard, so that address facing is a portion of your home, that's your front yard. The other that faces the side of your house that might still face the street is deemed a side yard in here, and those are all allowable. Another point of clarification, I certainly use waste bags, but I do put them in a refuse container. All I was saying was that I know there are people who don't always leave their trash in refuse containers outside because they just don't generate a lot of trash. So we've got, smaller families or single folks or the like who live in the township and might just place one bag of trash out in the morning, no more than a half an hour or hour before the truck comes. So I know I see that, but I don't put bags out at the street. Point was brought up about recyclable containers, other things, and I'm gonna kinda ask Mr. Tominello, as I read, number 7A, it says refuse may be stored outside if it's in a container and without holes, cracks, or other conditions that would allow, you know, rodents, insects, and the like. And then it goes on to then further explain where a refuse container can be. So I'm not sure if there's a specific need to clarify this further. The other thing is I don't know that we've received a lot of issues or blight or concerns about, you know, recycle bins, for example. I think a lot of people keep their recycle bins in their house or in their garage, a little bit smaller. And as it pertains to yard waste, I think you can address yard waste under other sections of our ordinance. If people have a large amount of debris that they're leaving for extended period of time, I don't know, I should say anyways, from my experience, I don't know that we've had a significant number of people addressing yard waste as an issue of blight other than, to the same frequency or level of concern that we have with folks putting trash cans out and leaving them out 7 days a week.
If the board is going to decide to move forward with this, maybe a suggestion would be to change the effective date of it. Because right now, let's say it's 30 days effective, so we're talking beginning of January, all of a sudden people have to change. It might be difficult to make changes to placement in the middle of winter if you have to sort of rearrange something on your yard or something like that. I don't know if it makes sense in pushing that timeline out. So if we do go forward with it, it gives somebody an opportunity to be able to make some changes if it's, you know, moving a plant or something or.
Mr. Supervisor, I guess my thought is, as we were hearing public comment, my thought would be to maybe have the opportunity to take this back to the planning commission, provide the feedback we received here from the board members and the residents, and rather than reading it in to the record tonight, go back and try to resolve it one more time. We do have a workshop coming up next month. That would give us time to fine tune this a little bit more. So if that sounds good, what I'll do is I will,
Rescind your motion?
yeah, rescind my motion. and-
Withdraw.
Withdraw.
Withdraw, okay.
You know,
At
one
this
of the
point.
things that was mentioned, I think everybody was, when we went to the single waste hauler, wasn't everybody given one of those big, like,
Yep.
plastic containers?
Well, or purchased one.
No,
Yes.
No,
no,
Oh,
because
really?
if you had one, I think if you had one, they didn't give it to you, and, yeah,
they were
The
available for
recycle bins
purchase.
were given away.
I
yeah.
thought
Everyone received the
Tringali gave everybody.
No,
The recycle bin.
No.
They gave everybody a recycle bin.
And Mr. York, that's why we still have some waste management cans around.
Well, I
Yeah.
bought my waste management cans.
that was
so
the
then when we-
problem.
Right,
There were so many
So
people
now
that
I
had
have,
those.
so now I have a
Right,
waste management can and a Tringali can. I think
That
they
sounds like
brought.
blight.
yeah, it sounds like
That's
blight
what
to
I'm
me.
saying.
They're mismatching? You allow that at your house?
You know, and the other thing I wanted to mention as well is we have been working on a blight ordinance. So, I'd like to provide that feedback as well, so maybe I can bring a package.
Yeah, and this, you know, this is, I think there's value to this ordinance, but I don't think it's time, you know, restrained.
no.
So I think that's a reasonable way to address this. There's clearly some value in taking another look at this, but there's obviously some feeling on the part of the residents, so there's value in taking another look.
I
Very good.
agree with Mr. Sensack's remarks. I think that there is additional debris that's maybe not covered, and somebody might split hairs and say, well, it doesn't say that, so I guess it doesn't hurt.
Okay,
Sure.
And while some of the blight issues seem to be more pressing, I think that it doesn't mean that we should prevent this one. I think we should address all the blight issues, not
Yeah.
just say no to this one because there's other blight issues out there. I think we should address them all.
And we're not in a triage mode, it's
Right.
worth talking
Exactly.
about, and especially as it pertains to, you say, planning commission, take another look at some of the
Yes.
other blight ordinances. So,
Right.
Mr. Tominello withdrew his motion, unless there's another motion on this, I suppose we'll move on to the next item. Next item on the agenda is item H from the treasurer's office. Mr. York?
Yes, board members, this is a proposal to replace our BSA, Exchange Fire, and PDC servers. I've mentioned this project pretty much all year. Our servers are currently, I think, right around 7 to 8 years old. And you know, when we buy hardware, we never buy the top of the line hardware, I guess. We always buy just a couple generations down, and a couple generations in the hardware world is maybe 3 or 4 months. Maybe, well, in the server industry, it's more like 6 months to a year. That hardware doesn't move as quickly as regular desktop computing. But when we replaced when we got .NET, unfortunately our hardware, our software is now somewhat exceeding our hardware. And when we put the original servers in, we never really anticipated at that time all of the uploading of pictures and data and those types of things. So we keep running into a storage problem. And because these servers are 7 years old, you know, we keep replacing memory. We've put Band-Aids on them. They have to use, I call it skizzy drives. You know, I know people say tomato. I call them skizzies. They're very expensive for little storage. This project, I'll just go over it. The BSNA server, you know, it's $17,000. That's the BSNA spec for 100 users. We can go down and save, you know, probably $6,000-7,000 on that server. But keep in mind, when they say 50 to 100 users, that is each time you have an application up. So for example, on my computer, I might have tax, water, sewer billing, and cash receipting. So
Could be
that's-
multiple users
so
on
I'm
one station.
considered 3 users at that point. You know, assessing might have 2 or 3 programs. Building might have a couple of programs up. So you take our employees. You know, what do we have? About 40 employees. You know, we normally have about 100 applications opened at once. I did, and I will say this, in their quote specs, they felt that they wanted SSD drives, and enterprise SSD drives was about a $5,000 option. I took that off. If we want to go to that type of storage for speed later, I think the prices are going to keep going down.
Absolutely.
You know, to be honest, I don't know that we need that for our system right now.
No.
But this, if you notice, we're gonna have plenty of I guess, cheaper drive storage, bays, so we can just
Still just as
expand,
reliable,
expand as needed. So that's the actual BSNA server that runs pretty much everything. I think you're the only office, Kevin, that doesn't have that.
No, we've got it.
Oh, do you? Okay. The Exchange server, of course, is our mail server. The fire department, I did call the chief, and while we're doing this project, it's always cheaper to you know, do them together, and he was all for us changing his server as well, and he's gonna pay for that server out of his own budget and a portion of the installation costs. And then we need the file server, that's just part of the BSNA and Exchange server package. You know, then you have all of the, you know, server licenses and things. So we'll be upgrading, I believe we're using Server 2000 right now. We'll be upgrading 2003. We'll be going up to Server 2012. So I think that, you know, hopefully with doing this, we'll, you know, be getting another 8 years or 9 years of service life. You know, one thing that bothered me was the installation. I thought the installation was a little high. So I did call a couple other computer places just to
Vendors.
see that, and they all said somewhere north of $10,000 to do the scope of work that we had. You know,
Maybe we could have Wade
price
Train do it.
seems reasonable. You know, we're dealing with 4 servers when you, about $4,000 a server normally. So that is the package, and I bring it right now. If we vote on this tonight, it takes about 3 weeks, hopefully not more than 3 weeks to get the hardware in. Jason needs to do a bunch of stuff to the hardware, moving files and all sorts of things like that. And our plan is to install over the holidays while we're off. So if something you know, should go wrong, you know, people aren't coming in and finding that the computer system's not working.
Well, I've got nothing but the highest level of confidence in Jason. Not only has he been able to take care of all of our needs, but he's shown a high level of service. So I have no concerns about that, and price seems to be in line, so it seems like, I think you're right about the drives too. I mean, I read some of these things now, and, you know, you look at the numbers, and you think, gosh, there was a time when these numbers were just there's no way something could do this. But it won't be that long before you'll read these things and say, would you buy that in the 70s? You know, it just changes so fast. But I think we're at the point where we've sapped all the life we could out of what we've got. And as you pointed out, if we go too much further, but we're gonna start to encounter some reliability issues, and you start to look at, well, what does a day or two of downtime cost, not only in that rush to repair things, but in loss in productivity. So I believe this is the right thing to do at this time.
We seem to be running out of memory a lot.
I have that problem regardless of the server, so I know what you mean.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to replace our BSA Exchange, Fire, and PDC servers by Computer Engineer Services
That's why,
SYO.
as stated 57,653
plus shipping.
plus shipping.
Yep,
I bet you we can get free shipping though.
all right.
With the cost and for the fire servers and portion of installation covered by the fire department budgets.
And also, I don't know what the breakdown is, that's why every time I see Glenn, I forget to ask him, but
We have a standard breakdown on
yeah,
departments.
there's a standard breakdown between departments, so water, sewer's got it, and I did talk to, Mr. Axtell about that. Water sewer normally pays, I don't know, 30% of the shared project.
It's like 50, 20, 30,
Yeah,
but
something
based
like
on the
that,
enterprise
so.
funds.
Yeah, but
The
there is
hit
a,
to the general fund won't be all
Yeah.
of that money.
Correct.
It might only be $25,000.
Yep.
I can send that breakdown to the board.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Smart.
All right, support by Mr. York. Discussion, board members?
Yeah, I do. I guess the only thing I would be asking Mr. York to follow up on, report back, is servers of this aptitude and running this type of, these type of applications need to be on a life cycle replacement schedule and along with a budget. So I guess in the future, rather than waiting till the last minute, I'd like Mr. York to come up with a life cycle replacement schedule so we can see it. So, you know, if life cycle is in 6 years, we know in 6 years we have to replace these rather than waiting to the point where they're just not working anymore. So I think that's good business sense, and I would like to see that.
All right. Any other?
Just so you know, we can say, we put them in, we said, 5 years. And what happens is, just like many boards, we face budget deficits and we put stuff off as long as they're working. I mean, even the computers, we've been really, as things break, we tend to replace them just because of our budget. And I'd be more than happy to replace stuff, every 4 or 5 years, but I guess my thought process on that is if it's working,
But that's not a good way to plan.
I understand.
I think that's
but-
what Larry's point
Right.
was, is
Exactly.
that
Any-
we should have a
any-
plan. I understand
I mean,
we'll stray
computers-
from it.
Computers,
You-
these servers, probably 5 or 6 years. If we were in an environment where we were expanding employees,
That has nothing to do with technology and applications and software change. So, so any IT area has a plan to life cycle equipment.
we're hoping to get 6 or 7 years out of this.
And this price is still good. It says it's from April 28th.
Yeah, he didn't change the date.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York to replace the BSNA Exchange, Fire, and PDC servers through the contract with SYO Computer Engineering Services at a cost of $57,653 with the appropriate breakdown per various funding sources.
I'll get that from Jason on the computer life cycles too.
All right, if there's no other comment, seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, next on the agenda is public comments and board comments. Are there any public comments? Nope, we moved I up to C2.
Okay, that's right.
And we do have a closed session, so after the comments, we do have, we're going into a closed session regarding.
Bill Servia,
attorney-
resident. Something I forgot to say when I was up here on the ZBA alternate. The lady needs to be informed that our policy is that the alternates get a packet for every meeting so that they can be up to speed if they should need to serve. And she may or may not know that. I don't know if she was told that or not.
Yeah, if there's a need to go to the clerk's office and so
Okay.
forth. yeah.
My other comment is, last meeting, you voted 6-1 to sell a property that the township owned for 20 foot wide. That parcel's actually over 500 feet deep. I did some checking into it. I couldn't find any law for the state of Michigan, but I did find a law from the state of Texas that states, state statute says that an appraisal has to be done on any publicly owned property that's sold. But I did go to the assessor's office, and I talked to Denise, and she told me that not Denise, Debbie.
Debbie.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right.
She told me that county drains, the big drains like the Petticonlet and that are the only ones where there's any relief on the value of the property. She feels that the value would be the same as the value of the person that is actually receiving that property, which is $2,850 a front foot. That would make it $57,000. I'm not suggesting you should have got $57,000, but even a fraction of that, $10,000, $5,000, something. I think there is value there. I think you should look at this again, or it's gonna come back to bite you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments for Mr. York. I do believe along that IT needs to be planned ahead of time. It's honorable, you want to save the township money, but you too should have a wish list on when things need to be replaced, and what you're, maybe sooner than 7 years, because you'll see the need and how much your system is being used and taxed at the time. But you too should have a wish list on wanting things to be replaced at least a few years prior before they'll cause you a big headache. So, but thank you for saving the township money.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comments. Board members, I did miss a couple of announcements, so I'd like to take a moment to touch on a few of those. A reminder to residents that yard waste pickup will stop on your last scheduled pickup day in November, and it will resume on the first scheduled pickup day in April. Our public library is hosting Tales with Tales Saturday, December 14th at noon. Children will get the chance to practice their reading with Patty, a licensed, certified, and insured therapy dog. Each child will get 15 minutes to read to Patty. You need to pre-register for that event.